Throughout history, humans have been driven not just by strength or wealth, but by ideas. Ideas shape societies, economies, and even our personal destinies. Yet there is one power that few truly understand, the power to influence the mind. Every thought we have, every choice we make, is influenced by the invisible currents of persuasion, suggestion, and understanding. Today, I want to explore a skill that is as ancient as storytelling and as modern as artificial intelligence. The ability to reach into the human mind, to understand it, and yes, to influence it. Because once you understand the mechanics of thought, you realize a profound truth: you can, with integrity and insight, unlock the minds of others. To understand the human mind is to stand at the intersection of biology, history, and culture, where evolution has sculpted our cognitive architecture over millions of years, and where societies and stories have layered meaning upon meaning, creating a labyrinth of thoughts, beliefs, and impulses. The human brain, for all its complexity, is not a singular entity. It is an evolving ecosystem of neurons, chemical signals, and electrical patterns, shaped to process information, detect patterns, and respond to environmental challenges. Every decision we make, every judgment we pass, is mediated by this architecture. And yet most of us navigate the world unaware of the intricate machinery beneath our conscious experience. To hack someone's mind, one must first appreciate that the mind is not a mysterious magic box, but a structured system with predictable vulnerabilities, biases, and tendencies that can be studied, understood, and subtly influenced. The first principle in this endeavor is recognition. Humans are not purely rational agents. Despite our claims of autonomy, our choices are profoundly shaped by cognitive shortcuts, heuristics that evolved to enable rapid decision-making in a world of scarcity and danger. These mental shortcuts, which serve as adaptive tools, can also be leveraged. Consider confirmation bias, the tendency to favor information that aligns with pre-existing beliefs. This bias is a doorway. It allows an influencer to present narratives that reinforce existing mental models, creating resonance without confrontation. Similarly, the social brain, evolved to maintain cohesion in small tribes, renders humans exquisitely sensitive to status, approval, and the subtle cues of group behavior. By appealing to these instincts, a skilled observer can guide attention, elicit agreement, and even shift beliefs without overt coercion. To hack a mind is not necessarily to deceive it, but to navigate the pathways that evolution and culture have etched into cognition. To understand the mental landscape. Before attempting to plant a seed, language itself is a critical tool in this landscape. Humans are, at their core, story-driven animals. Our ancestors survived and thrived not because of superior strength, but because of shared myths, collective fictions, and the ability to communicate abstract concepts. Every thought is embedded within a narrative structure, a thread linking perception, memory, and imagination. By framing information in a compelling narrative, one can bypass the raw analytical faculties of the mind and speak directly to its emotional and associative layers. The words themselves, carefully chosen, can activate mental schemas, trigger memories, and elicit emotional responses, creating a bridge between what is imagined and what is believed. This is why rhetoric, storytelling, and persuasive communication have always been powerful tools in human history, whether in the hands of tribal leaders, religious prophets, or modern marketers. Hacking a mind, therefore, is inseparable from the mastery of language, not as a superficial instrument, but as a medium that shapes perception itself. Yet, to understand the architecture of thought is to recognize its dual nature, conscious and unconscious. Most of human cognition occurs beneath the threshold of awareness. The brain continuously integrates sensory data, emotional signals, and social cues, producing behavior and judgments before we are even aware of them. This unconscious processing is both a limitation and an opportunity. It limits the apparent control we have over our decisions, revealing the fragility of the autonomous self. And yet, it allows an informed observer to anticipate reactions, prime responses, and gently redirect attention and intention. Subliminal cues, framing effects, and environmental triggers exploit these unconscious processes, nudging decisions in subtle ways. For instance, the placement of objects, the cadence of speech, the rhythm of social interaction. All these factors influence choice long before the conscious mind intervenes. To hack the mind is to engage with these layers, not forcibly, but with the understanding that the mind is receptive to suggestion when approached along its natural lines of processing. Historical examples illustrate this principle in striking clarity. Consider the political and religious movements of the past millennia. Leaders who could inspire loyalty, obedience, and collective action did so not merely by imposing rules or threats, but by mastering symbols, narratives, and rituals that aligned with deep-seated cognitive tendencies. Symbols act as anchors for the mind, condensing complex ideas into easily recognized forms that evoke powerful emotional responses. Rituals structure perception of time and action, creating predictable patterns that guide behavior. Stories shape moral intuitions, providing templates for evaluating right and wrong, friend and foe, us and them. In each case, the external environment was crafted to interact with internal cognitive architecture, demonstrating that the mind is not isolated but profoundly responsive to context. Culture and repetition. Modern psychology and neuroscience confirm what ancient leaders intuited. Cognition can be influenced systematically when one understands its structure. A crucial component of the architecture of thought is memory. Memory is not a passive repository but a dynamic, reconstructive process. Each recollection is shaped by current beliefs, emotional states, and social pressures. This malleability is both a challenge and an opportunity for influence. By carefully guiding attention, repetition, and emotional context, one can reinforce certain memories while allowing others to fade. Advertisers, educators, and leaders have long exploited this principle, embedding desired associations in ways that feel organic to the individual. The mind is, in essence, a narrative engine, constantly revising its own story. By understanding the mechanisms of attention, reinforcement, and emotional salience, one can interact with this engine, subtly redirecting the plot without the subject realizing the manipulation. Equally important is understanding the role of emotion in decision-making. Emotion and cognition are inseparable. They co-evolved to ensure survival. Fear sharpens attention. Love fosters bonding. Anger mobilizes energy. And curiosity drives exploration. Rational deliberation is often a veneer atop these primal currents. To influence thought, one must engage emotion first, because the mind interprets logical arguments through the filter of feeling. A well-timed aim. A vivid metaphor or a provocative question can open doors that abstract reasoning alone cannot. Neuroscience shows that emotional engagement enhances memory consolidation and increases receptivity to new information, demonstrating that effective influence is both art and science, rooted in the deepest mechanics of neural processing. The architecture of thought is further complicated by the interplay of individuality and culture. Each mind is unique, shaped by personal experiences, genetics, and social context, yet it is also embedded within broader cultural patterns. These patterns establish norms, expectations, and shared symbols that constrain and guide cognition. Understanding culture is therefore essential to hacking the mind. What resonates in one cultural context may fall flat in another, Skilled influencers are adept at decoding these layers, identifying universal cognitive tendencies while tailoring approaches to individual and cultural variation. The most profound influence occurs when interventions align with both the deep architecture of thought and the surface level preferences and values of the target audience. Finally, there is the ethical dimension embedded in understanding the mind's architecture. Knowledge of how thoughts can be guided confers power, and power, if unchecked, can easily be abused. To hack a mind responsibly requires discernment, integrity, and humility. The architecture of thought reveals not only vulnerabilities but also opportunities for connection, empathy, and shared understanding. Influence need not be manipulation. It can be facilitation, helping individuals clarify their own goals, question their assumptions, and expand their awareness. True mastery of this domain lies in the balance between insight and restraint, between understanding the machinery of thought and respecting the autonomy of those whose minds we seek to engage. The architecture of the human mind is vast, intricate, and endlessly fascinating. By studying it, observing patterns, and recognizing both conscious and unconscious processes, we unlock the possibility of influence that is profound yet subtle. It is not a matter of magic, coercion, or deception. It is a matter of understanding the interplay between biology, cognition, culture, and emotion, and using that understanding to guide, inspire, and shape perception. To hack a mind is ultimately to enter into a dialogue with the deepest currents of thought, navigating the contours of memory, attention, and belief, and creating pathways for new ideas, insights, and behaviors to emerge. It is an endeavor that demands patience, observation, and ethical reflection, a discipline that blends science, art, and philosophy into a singular pursuit of understanding. To hack a mind, one must first recognize that influence is not an abstract, mystical force, but a set of observable, measurable mechanisms that have evolved over millennia. Humans did not survive in isolation. Our ancestors thrived because they could coordinate, persuade, and respond to the needs and signals of others in a social ecosystem. Influence, therefore, is woven into the very fabric of human cognition. Every interaction, from a glance across a crowded room to a carefully crafted speech, is an opportunity to direct attention, shape perception, and guide action. The mind responds predictably to certain triggers, and these triggers can be mapped, studied, and utilized with precision. This is the first principle of the mechanics of influence. Attention is the currency of the mind. What we notice, what we ignore, and what we are reminded of repeatedly structures our perception of reality. If influence begins with attention, then the question becomes, how does one capture and hold the attention of another human being in a world overflowing with stimuli and distraction? The answer lies in the interplay of novelty, relevance, and emotional resonance. Human cognition is biased toward novelty because throughout evolutionary history, the unexpected could signal danger or opportunity. An unusual sound, an unfamiliar face, or a story that defies expectations instantly attracts attention. Relevance ensures that the attention is not fleeting. People are more likely to engage deeply with information that connects to their goals, desires, or self-image. Emotional resonance provides the fuel that transforms mere notice into lasting impact. Fear, curiosity, joy, anger, and awe activate neurological pathways that prioritize certain inputs over others, imprinting them onto memory and shaping subsequent behavior. To hack a mind is to understand these pathways and to craft messages, environments, and experiences that engage attention, relevance, and emotion simultaneously, creating a resonance that feels natural rather than forced. One of the most powerful tools in this domain is repetition. Human cognition relies on patterns, and repeated exposure to ideas reinforces their presence in memory and perception. Political campaigns, religious rituals, advertising, and propaganda all exploit this principle, often without overt coercion, because repetition leverages the mind's inherent trust in what is familiar. When an idea is encountered frequently, the brain interprets it as credible, important, and salient. This is not a flaw, it is a survival adaptation, allowing early humans to distinguish recurring signals of danger or opportunity from random noise. Yet, in the modern context, this adaptation can be harnessed consciously. Repeated exposure to a concept, framed in emotionally engaging ways, can shift perception, reinforce beliefs, and shape decisions. Mastering repetition is therefore central to understanding the mechanics of influence. Another critical component is framing. Humans do not perceive facts in isolation. They interpret them within contexts that assign meaning and value. The way information is presented, the metaphors used, the comparisons drawn, the narrative structure dramatically alters its reception. A single event can be framed as opportunity or threat, gain or loss, justice or injustice, depending on the language, tone, and surrounding cues. Studies in behavioral economics illustrate that identical outcomes elicit radically different reactions depending on presentation, revealing the subtle power of framing to shape perception. To hack a mind is to recognize these frames and to guide interpretation in ways that align with intended influence while remaining coherent with the target's worldview. It is not deception in the crude sense, but the strategic structuring of context so that the mind draws predictable conclusions. Social dynamics form another layer of influence that is both ancient and deeply embedded. Humans evolved as cooperative animals in hierarchically structured groups. We are acutely sensitive to authority, conformity, and social norms. Observing and leveraging these tendencies allows an influencer to amplify their effect through mechanisms that feel entirely organic. People are influenced not only by the content of information, but by the perceived consensus around it, by the signals of approval or disapproval from peers, and by the behavior of those they respect or aspire to emulate. This is why social proof is so compelling. The mind interprets collective behavior as a heuristic for truth, safety, and correctness. Influence, in this sense, is often less about changing ideas directly than about creating conditions where the mind aligns naturally with desired actions and beliefs because of the social cues embedded in its environment. Emotion, once again, is the engine of influence. Rational argument alone rarely moves people at a profound level. It is the emotional subtext, the visceral response, that drives action. Humans are wired to respond more to stories than to statistics, more to faces than to abstract principles, more to narratives that evoke empathy than to dry logic. Neuroscience demonstrates that the brain processes emotional and social stimuli more rapidly and vividly than purely cognitive data. When an influencer taps into this circuitry, through compelling storytelling, evocative imagery, or the subtle cues of tone, gesture, and pacing, they access pathways that bypass superficial resistance and create enduring impressions. Influence is therefore a craft of emotional architecture, designing experiences, messages, and interactions that align with the mind's natural responsiveness to feeling as well as thought. Cognitive biases are equally central to the mechanics of influence. These biases, systematic deviations from rational judgment, emerged as adaptive shortcuts in an uncertain, dangerous world. They remain embedded in modern cognition, shaping decisions in predictable ways, anchoring where initial information skews subsequent judgment, availability, where vivid or recent events dominate perception, halo effect, where impression in one domain influences evaluation in another. All these biases can be leveraged to guide thought subtly. Awareness of one's own biases enhances self-understanding, while awareness of others' biases allows for strategic influence. Importantly, these interventions do not require manipulation in the sense of trickery. They are exercises in alignment, using the architecture of cognition to nudge thought along pathways that are coherent with existing mental structures. Attention, framing, repetition, social dynamics, emotion, and cognitive biases converge in the mechanics of influence. Yet, there is an additional dimension often overlooked: environmental design. The mind does not operate in isolation. It is continuously shaped by the physical, social, and digital environment. The layout of a space, the sequencing of experiences, the timing of communication. All these factors can prime attention, evoke emotion, and guide perception. Architecture, ritual, and even user interface design exploit these principles, demonstrating that influence is not limited to language or direct interaction, but extends to every context in which the mind operates. Well-structured environment can reinforce desired beliefs, create intuitive behaviors, and subtly channel attention without overt instruction. To hack a mind is, therefore, to think systemically, to consider the interplay between individual cognition and the broader environment in which it is embedded. Persistence and patience are essential virtues in this practice. Influence is rarely instantaneous. Minds are complex, adaptive systems resistant to sudden change. Just as the evolution of cognition took millennia, the shaping of thought occurs over repeated exposure, iterative adjustment, and consistent reinforcement. Quick tricks may yield momentary compliance, but lasting influence requires a deep understanding of the temporal dynamics of perception, memory, and social reinforcement. It is a long game, requiring observation, reflection, and strategic action that respects both the structure of the mind and the ethical responsibility of guiding it. Ethics, inevitably, is intertwined with mechanics. Understanding how minds can be influenced is a form of power, and power divorced from ethical reflection can become destructive. To hack a mind responsibly is to align influence with transparency, empathy, and the genuine well-being of those whose cognition is engaged. Influence can educate, inspire, and empower, or it can manipulate, deceive, and exploit. The difference lies in intent and respect for autonomy. Mastery of the mechanics of influence is not merely technical skill, it is a philosophical practice that requires the practitioner to reflect continuously on the purpose, impact, and moral implications of their interventions. The mechanics of influence reveal that the human mind is not a fixed, impenetrable fortress, but a responsive system shaped by attention, framing, repetition, social cues, emotion, cognitive biases, and environmental design. Each element interacts with the others, producing a dynamic, adaptive system that can be guided subtly, consistently, and ethically. To hack a mind is to understand these elements, to observe patterns, and to design interventions that resonate with the natural functioning of cognition. It is a discipline that blends science and art, empirical observation and imaginative strategy, practical insight, and ethical reflection. The mind is a landscape, and influence is the careful shaping of that terrain, a process that requires knowledge, skill, and above all, a deep understanding of what it means to be human.